Hello and welcome to the Peter Switzer Show. I'm Peter Switzer and thanks for joining us. On today's program, I'm talking to a really interesting guy, Rainer Zitelmann. He's an author from Germany. We're talking to him from Berlin, and the name of the book is The Rich in Public Opinion. He's gone and done a worldwide survey of all different sorts of people around the world and what they think of rich people. And he's focused particularly on the younger groups. Is fascinating. The kind of revelations he's looking at is the fact that in America, young people are becoming goddamn lefties. And in Italy, the young Italians really actually like rich people. It's a fascinating look at the changing nature of humanity and the view on rich people. That's coming up our first interview. Then we talk to Pamela Bishop from Bloom's the Chemist. This is, she's the Chief Marketing Officer, and she talks about what's like being on the front line fighting the coronavirus in a really important business sector called pharmacy or the chemist. And finally, we talk to Andrew Crawley from Seguro Risk Management. And this guy talks about resuscitating, if possible, zombie companies. And he reckons there's a whole lot out there because the government has been keeping them on life support. That's the show for tonight. And today, let's go and talk to Rainer Zitelmann. He's a German historian, author, management consultant and sociologist. And he has a new book out called The Rich in Public Opinion. Welcome to the program, Rainer.
Hello. Nice to be again with you.
Yeah, same here. Now, because you're a very respectable man, Rainer, you've got a very nice title, The Rich in Public Opinion. But if I was writing this book, I would have had something like, Why the Man in the Street Hate the Rich. Now, that is a more provocative title, but would it be a correct title? After all your research, does the average man in the street hate the rich?
First of all, I agree this title would be much better for selling the book, but it wouldn't be correct because there are people who hate the rich and there are people with stereotypes and prejudice against rich people, but these are not all people. And it's different from country to country. And what we did, we commissioned a poll in 4 countries, in the United States, UK, France, and Germany. And we asked the same questions in all these countries to find out what people really think about the rich, the wealthy. And there were huge differences between each country, huge differences in the age groups and so on. I think we will talk about it in the next half hour.
Okay, so let me get this straight then. What country seemed to have a more positive view on the rich?
It was UK and United States. And then on the other end, the most envious country is France. After France, Germany. We calculated something that I call the social envy coefficient. What does it mean? We have different groups in every society. One group we call the envious, and the other group the non-envious. And then the middle between both groups are the ambivalent. And then we calculated what is the ratio between 2 groups, between the envious and the non-envious. And this is then the social envy coefficient. To make it maybe a little bit easier, the higher the number is, the more envious are the people in a country. And in France, it was 1.21. In Germany, it was 0.97. And then in United States, it was 0.42. And in UK, 0.37. But these are only the results for the population in general, for the population as a whole. But of course, there were big differences, for example, in the United States with the age groups. I will give you one example. People in the United States younger than 30, they are very, very negative towards rich people. And people who are older than 60, Americans, they are very positive. I will give you only an example with one question. We confronted the interviewers with the following statement. Rich people are good at earning money, but they are not usually decent people. A very negative statement about rich people. And in the United States, population as a whole, 27% agreed. But from the young people under 30, 40% agreed, 40%. And then if you look at the answers of the older Americans, older than 60, only 15% agreed and 50% disagreed. So it was with all the other questions. And what we did right now, this is not in the book, but there will be Italian edition of the book next year. And now we ask the same questions in Italy. And this I can tell you a very interesting example. There it was, for example, the other way around. Young people were very, very positive toward rich people, and older people in Italy were very, very negative. So you see, on the one hand, you have a result for the population as a whole, but there are huge differences, especially with age groups and, of course, with income groups and so on.
So what do you think is driving the attitude towards the rich in the different age groups and in the different countries?
There, if you are economically or financially not so successful as someone else, you have different ways to react. There are some people, they see someone who is richer than he, then for him, maybe it is a motivation. There were a lot of people who said rich people who made it due to their own efforts, they are role models for us, and then they can motivate me. But there's another kind of reaction. This group, I spoke about the group of the envious, and these are people, their most important ambition is not to improve their own situation, but they feel good if the situation for the rich people becomes worse. I give you some example that it is maybe a little bit more concrete. We had one question. We asked the people, we confronted them with the following statement. I would favor drastically the question was, I think it would be fair to increase taxes substantially for millionaires, even if I would not benefit from it personally. So that means these social envious are not primarily motivated by the desire to improve their own situation, to close the gap between themselves and the rich. They are far more concerned with making life worse for the rich or take something away, even if it does not create any personal benefit. I give you another example. We had the statement, I would favor drastically reducing manager salaries and redistributing the money more evenly among their employees, even if that would mean that the employees would get only a few dollars per month. So it is the same principle. You drastically reducing CEO compensation, manager salaries, and the people, the employees, they have no real advantage if they have only maybe $2 or $3 more a month. Or the last statement, or dozens of statements, but the last example that I want to give you, this was one question we called the Schadenfreude question, and this was the statement: when I hear about a millionaire who made a risky business decision and lost a lot of money because of it, I think it serves him right. And if people answered with, agreed with all this kind of statements, then we called them the envious.
Yep.
And if they disagreed with the statement, then we called them the non-envious. And because we raised the same questions in all three countries, it was very easy to compare it.
So I was going to say, in the countries where the level of social welfare was really high, did that sort of population or that group of people have a little bit more compassion towards the rich. And, I'm looking at, for example, the US. I don't think the level of social welfare is all that great in the US, but they seem to be more compassionate towards the rich. Did you consider some of the conflicts in these conclusions?
Yes, but this was the American tradition that people were skeptical against the state, skeptical against high taxes, and pro-capitalism, pro-entrepreneurship, pro-free market. These are the Americans like we knew them for decades. This is a tradition in the United States. But what I want to say, it changes now because I mentioned that younger Americans, they have a totally different view. And this is interesting that something changes. You saw it in politics as well, that very left-wing politicians like Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren got a lot of support, especially from young Americans.
Yep. And Raina, do you think what you're seeing then is a socialistic tendency for younger people of the world? And do you think it's linked to the fact that older and richer people don't seem to be worked up about issues like climate change?
No, it's not generally true. It's only for American with this difference between young and old people. As I mentioned, for example, in Italy, it's exactly the other way around.
Yeah.
Young people are much more positive toward rich people than older people. And even in France and Germany and UK, it was so that the young people were a little bit more positive toward the rich, not so much as it was in Italy, but they were more positive. So you can't generalize it. I see that there's a general tendency all over the world against capitalism. If you compare it with the 80s, when we had politicians like Ronald Reagan in the United States, Maggie Thatcher in UK, or even in China, Deng Xiaoping, people with pro-market attitudes. And if you compare it with the world today, there's a change, and people are much more skeptical against capitalism. And what I see as a problem, this prejudices against the rich. Some people told me, oh, okay, maybe people have negative stereotypes and prejudices that maybe are not okay. But what's the problem for rich people? Anyway, they have a great life, they can enjoy their life, they have a lot of money, they have a lot of privileges. And on the one hand, it's true. But on the other hand, please don't forget that words become deeds. Maybe I can tell you some experience from me here in Germany, where I come from. We had here demonstrations at the Labor Day, and there were posters with slogans like "Kill your landlord," for example. Or there were posters with a guillotine and the writing beside the guillotine against the city of the rich. And, these are very aggressive slogans against rich people. And if you look at the internet, you can buy a lot of T-shirts that should be funny, like "Eat the rich" or even "Kill the rich," and so on. And I give you a thought experiment. If you think for a moment, there would be similar slogans against, for example, black people, like "Kill black people," or "Kill or kill Jewish people," or "Kill Muslims," everyone would be outraged righteously. Yeah. This is not accepted in any way to speak so negative about minorities. And this is one of my arguments, that rich people are the only minority where it's allowed to speak very, very negative and aggressive against them. And it's accepted in society. And but if you look in history in the 20th century, you saw that there were a lot of cases where rich people were expropriated or were killed. Remember, for example, with what happened with hundreds of thousands so-called kuliks, that means wealthy peasants in Russia that were killed only because they were rich. And the same happened in Cambodia with the Khmer Rouge, or the same happened in China in the Cultural Revolution. And there were a lot of examples in the 20th century where rich people were victims. And this is what a lot of people don't know today, because at school they hear a lot of things about the evils of capitalism, but they don't hear much about these things, what happened in history. And in the first step, it was always against rich people, but then it was against other people as well, as in Russia or in the Cultural Revolution in China. And so my book is a kind of warning. And what I saw when I thought about prejudice and stereotypes against rich people, I looked in the scientific literature whether there is some research in it. But what was very interesting, we have thousands of books about stereotypes against Jewish people, against Black people, against gay people, against women. Even we have scientific studies in prejudice against poor people or overweight people, but there was almost nothing about prejudice against rich people. So this is the first book now about this topic, and so it was published in Germany and now in the United States. In the UK, it will be published in China and will be published in Italy, because it's really the first book for someone who's interested. And it was not only that we had this polls. I told you about the numbers with this polls. Don't be afraid. It's not a book only with such figures and numbers, but there's, for example, one chapter about an analysis of Hollywood movies, how rich people are portrayed in Hollywood movies. Yeah. This was very interesting as well. We analyzed more than 500 Hollywood movies, and there was an in-depth analysis of 43 Hollywood movies. And we analyzed how rich people were portrayed, and they were portrayed almost in most cases in a very negative way if you compare it how non-rich people are portrayed in Hollywood movies.
So, Rainer, looking at the body of work in your very impressive book, would you say that rich people have something to worry about when you look at the trends in terms of the attitudes towards them?
Yes, absolutely. And it don't has to be so extreme or bad as the examples that I mentioned in the 20th century where rich people were killed. But even there, other things can happen. Think about Sweden in the 70s, for example. They had such extreme wealth tax. Some cases, it was more than 100%. It was very, very bad, and there a lot of rich people had to leave Sweden in the 70s. Like, for example, the founder of this furniture manufacturer, IKEA, he had to leave Sweden because of this extreme high taxes. But this harmed not only the rich people, but it harmed the society as a whole, because this socialist policy that started with extreme high taxes for wealthy people was a totally disaster for the whole society. And but I think rich people should learn from other minorities. Look, for example, if you compare the situation of gay people, homosexual people 50 years ago and now. 50 years ago, there was a very, very extreme negative attitude in a lot of even Western countries. It was forbidden by the law, and there was a lot of discrimination. And today, the situation turned. For example, in Berlin, we had a mayor who said at a speech, "I'm proud to be gay," for example. You couldn't imagine something like this would happen 50 years ago or even 30 years ago. But what could you learn from these other minorities? They did something to for example, there was a lot of scientific research about prejudice against these groups, but much more important in politics, they engaged themselves for their own rights to stand their ground, and this is what I miss with rich people. In most cases, they are silent. They are not able to explain people in the society why rich people are important. And I had another interview in Germany. It was some month ago, and I was asked the following questions: do you think we really need super rich people? Why do we need super rich people? And I answered with another question. I asked him, do you think we need successful entrepreneurs? Because this is the same. We know this from academic wealth research that most people, rich people, became rich as entrepreneurs. Look at the Forbes list of the richest people in the world. You see, number one, it's Jeff Bezos. He became rich with Amazon. Look at Bill Gates, who became rich with Microsoft. Look at Sergey Brin or Larry Page, who became rich with Google, or Mark Zuckerberg, who became rich with Facebook, and this people from Forbes, they have every year this Forbes 400. These are the 400 richest people in United States, and they analyzed the percentage of these 400 people that were self-made billionaires, and compared it with those, they called it silver spoons or heirs. Yeah. And what is interesting, and a lot of people don't know it, 1984, 48% of the richest Americans were self-made, 48%. Today, it's 67%, 67%. Most of them are self-made. And if you attack rich people, it's nothing else that you attack successful entrepreneurs. And if someone asks me, why do we need rich people? I tell them, because we need people like Steve Jobs. We need people like Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates. They are important for our society.
Yeah, and they're certainly big job creators as well. By the way, the one thing you would have noticed that those minority groups that you talked about who have straddled the great divide from being downtrodden to actually having quite a lot of power nowadays, they always had the media on their side championing their cause. I don't think the media are very comfortable with the rich. Did your work look at the media and its attitude towards the rich?
Yes, absolutely. This, this book is like 550 pages, and I think more than 100 pages are about, it's a media analysis, how rich people are portrayed in newspapers or in TV or in the internet. And I mentioned before in Hollywood movies as well. And in most cases, the media have much more negative picture of rich people than I think is justified. But I don't think that the media is the only reason. It is one reason, but not the only reason. Before I speak about the media, I will tell you another very interesting result that we had in all countries the same question, but there was one question that we asked only in Germany and Italy. And this a little bit complicated to explain, but I think I can explain it. We confronted people with a list of personality traits, for example, like intelligent or ruthless, greedy, industrious, also some positive and some negative personality traits. And then we asked the people, what do you think, what personality traits what are most likely that rich people have this personality traits? And the answers were in most cases negative, like self-centered, ruthless, materialistic, and. But then we did something very interesting. In the next step, we asked only those people who knew at least one millionaire in person. And this was a minority, because most of the interviews, if we asked them, do you know one or more millionaires in person, they said no. But there was one subgroup who knew millionaire in person. Then we asked them, what do you think about this millionaire, about his personality traits? And then it was exactly the other way around. The answers were, he's intelligent, he's industrious, he is optimistic, he's visionary. And we know this as well with other minorities. If people don't have any contact with a minority group, in some cases they have a very negative picture, but if they know them in person, then they have more differentiated side of this people. So you spoke about the media, and it's true. The media, they have an effect, and I think it is mostly a negative effect. But this is not the only reason. I think more important is, if there's a society that promises equality, that all people are equal, but in the end we know from the result, not all people will be equal. There will be some people who are rich, some people who are poor, and so on. And then for the people who are not so successful, it is really frustrating. And then I developed something, I call it the compensation theory. What do I mean with this? If you see that there's someone better in some aspects of life, it's not only about wealthy, it can be more intelligent or even more beautiful or whatever, then a lot of people react in this way to maintain their self-conscious, that they have no inferior complex. Then they give this person more some negative points in other fields. For example, they say, I had this question, okay, maybe he's successful with money, but I'm sure on the other hand, he has a bad moral, for example, or for example, he's not honest on the other hand. And this is not only true for rich people. We have similar prejudices, for example, against pretty women. Yeah, that people say, oh, she's so beautiful, but I think maybe she's not so intelligent, or it's sometimes the same for extreme intelligent people, like professors at the university, where people say, oh, maybe, okay, you read a lot of books and he's very intelligent, but I'm sure on the other hand, in daily life, I think he's not fit for daily life, or he's kind of nerd, and so on. This is a structure of a prejudice against successful people in general.
Yeah. Rainer, I could talk to you all day. Your book is fantastic. It actually does make people think about the nature of rich people and how we view them. And I think anyone who reads your book will get some fantastic insights. Rainer Zitelmann, the author of the book, The Rich in Public Opinion. Thanks for joining us on the Peter Switzer Show.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure for me. I appreciate to speak with you again.
Yep, and that was Rainer Zitelmann. Now, look, we always do a little bit of an ad now. We've noticed a lot of people have been taking up our free offer for a Switzer report. That's where we get some of the best stock tipsters in the country to give their best views on what looks like really good value. If you're interested, there's a 21 a free day trial. Just go to switzerreport.com.au. I hope you do that, try it, and I hope you use the information there to avoid being poor and to get rich instead, which I think is a better option.